Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This story is called Human FTL Methodology, written by Uncommonality. Among Starship engineers, it is said that no two FTL systems are identical. This saying refers to something very fundamental in FTL science, the idea of cross-cultural dissimilarity, a peculiar quirk in cultural development which results in every civilization that has ever crossed the light barrier doing so in a different way. Take, for example, the Ilum, whose vessels are incredibly dense, armor-plated spheres which are accelerated like a railgun projectile between two binary stars, tearing a wormhole at the exact midpoint between the two suns, and slowing down by plunging directly through the outer plasma of another star. There's more math behind it, of course, but this is the gist. Or the dart engine of the Sylvestus, which uses novel kind of fractalizing radiation to make its vessel that it is attached to simultaneously exist at every point within several light years of its origin point in a state of quantum fog before condensing back into matter at its destination. Once again, more math, but this is basically how it works. It is therefore rather difficult to detect and therefore assemble a greeting party for any newly minted superluminal species, while remaining totally hands-off beforehand. It is therefore unfortunate necessity to, yes, spy on primitive civilizations which look close to reaching that particular hurdle in their development. The galactic community truthfully cannot handle another contact war, and many species are very territorial indeed. Some to the point of shooting first and asking questions later, when an unidentified vessel appears out of nowhere over the capital world, making the spying a necessity. Luckily, it only takes a single individual per civilization, as the development of FTL technology necessitates a planetary unification before it can be accomplished. The problem tends to be too complex for one nation-state to solve on its own without devoting an entire scientific community towards it. It has just so happened that the spy assigned to a small blue-green planet circling a Type G star had just phoned home and reported of a promising developments in the scientific community of the civilization occupying that planet. Unknowingly shadowed by a medical scout vessel, courtesy of their nearest stellar neighbors, the UNE Lightbreaker was rapidly approaching the position calculated by the eggheads back home to have the least spatial coherence, and therefore the best chance of successfully opening an interstellar gateway. This point was in a relatively empty part of the Oort cloud, as far away from the outer gas giants as possible. This also made it very quiet and very dark. Within the vessel, tension could probably be cut with a knife. 7 humans, the best and brightest, stared stone-faced at their assigned stations, occasionally glancing at the countdown with their little experiment. They would be pioneers, likely remembered forever, but only if they didn't fuck it up right now. We have reached the critical position. All right, fire up. If metal could scream, it would, as the reactor core began to slow its wind-up, suspended within the near-perfect vacuum. The core was mounted on a rotating wheel that was theoretically capable of spinning at 99.997 speed of light for roughly 20 minutes. After that, the space-time distortion of such an immense velocity difference would heat the metal enough to cause it to deform, until the two metal bits, one moving at near C and one not, collided and instantaneously turned the entire ship and everything nearby into a rapidly expanding cloud of superheated plasma. This extreme velocity difference was necessary. At the so-called Eye of the Storm, the center of the hourglass-shaped reactor core, an infinitesimal blob of exotic matter floated in perfect stasis, ordinarily just a bit of gravitational repellent. This blob, when excited by extreme spatial shearing, was capable of sort of grinding together two parts of the universe, which would then theoretically open a kind of wormhole into whatever it was that existed outside of space-time. That was where the proven science ended, however, and what happened after that wormhole formed was what they were out here to find out. Within the medical scout, several warning lights began to rapidly cycle, first blue, then yellow, and finally green. The ship's internal space distortion sensor picked up an immense amount of warping space-time within the human craft, the intensity of which soon exceeded their instruments. Ordering the ship to move back to a safe distance, the crew watched in horror as space around the human vessel contorted, stretched, frayed, and finally snapped, tearing apart the very fabric of reality around the chrome hull. Shaking off their stupor, the captain ordered his crew to move in for an assist, only to watch in horror as the blackness surrounding the human vessel formed into a void-like tentacle, gripping the sleek metal and pulling it under, into a direction that made their senses shriek in offense at its non-existence. Those same tentacles began feeding outwards from the hole in space, when suddenly there was an immense tidal shift, and the universe seemed to grind two slates of space-time over the Rapture, sealing it shut and cutting off any remaining bits of whatever monstrosity was attempting to come through. The emotionless voice of the ship computer startled the bridge crew of the ill-morning Jew, leader of the galactic community welcoming fleet, currently stationed in the humans' projected FTL destination. Receiving priority message from scout stationed in the humans' first FTL test. Message reads, human drive successful, departure confirmed, unknown hostile forces present within human FTL medium, current vessel status unknown, message time signature reads 31:42:55. Now that is alarming. They should be here any second now. I hope they're all right. As if to answer that question, all three ambassadors shielded their eyes as an immense flash lit up the dead of space just ahead. The universe seemed to almost bulge outwards before snapping back and spitting out the dented chrome hull of the human prototype. Space already shifting around behind it to seal up the hole, through which they could see, even now, the unfathomable sea of eyes and slick black tentacles. The slates slammed together, cutting off four of the tentacles while wrapping around the human craft, leaving them to dissipate to nothing. We are receiving a hail. On screen, translator enabled. A frazzled-looking human appeared on their view screen. Momentarily baffled, he opened his mouth and spoke words that would end up in history books for all time. Aliens are real! End of story. Story number 2. Why does the human look sad? Clonk looked at one of the humans his team had been working with for quite a while now, and could only feel concerned. The human was usually very outgoing and a cheery being, but lately they'd become very melancholic. Human Julius, do you know what has happened to human Peter? Clonk asked the other human on his team. Julius paused in thought for a moment, before a look that Clonk recognized as realization appeared on his face. Ah, I know what happened. Didn't you hear? Clonk shook his head, and the gestures he learned to humans to mean no. Pete, had to put his dog to sleep. Clonk does not understand. Is sleep not a requirement for much of your Deathworld species? No, Clonk. It's a polite way of saying, they had the dog killed. Why would he do that? I recall that human Peter often spoke of his deep affection for the creature. It is something that happens sometimes. Dogs grow old faster than humans do. They get ill or start to hurt. So you killed them? Julius paused in thought. Part of the interspecies training had told them to treat each other more like children of their species, mainly because they were both entirely unfamiliar with each other's customs. So it was easier to address issues in such a manner. It's more out of kindness. We don't want them living in pain just to satisfy ourselves. So, human Peter's dog was in pain. Maybe, I honestly don't know the full details, but it is something that does happen. It is always sad. I know my heart would shatter if I had to say goodbye to Mr. Mittens, my new kitten. You would rather suffer the destruction of your blood-pumping organ. Human Peter, stay still. I shall gather the medical team. Clonk, no, Julius shouted, trying to stop the now panicking alien. It's a metaphor. It is a way of saying emotional pain. Oh, cancel the medical team. The already rushing medical staff began to slow, only to look very disappointed in being unable to provide care. What's going on, guys? Peter asked, approaching the pair after hearing his name called. Sorry, human Peter, we were discussing your recent dog. Peter blinked a few times before his lower lip began to tremble, only for him to stiffen his facial features. It's okay. She was 15. That's really good innings for a dog. I can see that you are under emotional duress, human Peter. That is because I lost a member of my family. You were biologically related. No wonder why you are in such distress. This one suffered great emotional instability when I lost its grand hatchling. No, we aren't biologically related. It's a human thing. We'll bond with creatures even outside our species. But I take comfort in a bit of knowledge that I was told by my parents when I was young. What's that, Pete? That when you take an animal into your family, you give them a piece of your heart. In return, they give you a piece of theirs. Clonk opened his mouth only to have Julius interrupt him and whisper before he could even utter a word. A metaphor. That's why it hurts so much when you lose them. Because you're losing a piece of yourself with them. But you should take comfort, as while that part of you is gone, you will forever have that part that they gave you. I can still vividly remember every dog that I've had throughout my life. It'll ever not hurt saying goodbye, but it is still worth the pain to enjoy the years of love that they can offer. Oh, I see. Should we exchange portions of our blood-pumping organ, Human Peter? Would that help? Peter let out a little chuckle at the first smile that a scene in a while showed in his face. That's okay, Clonker. I appreciate the sentiment. End of story.